Well, welcome to the week 5 lesson recording for Visual Basic. And you can see that week 5 is a framework and objects unit. And week 5, of course, you have the Class Connect write-up. You have what's called the finishing plan. And I'll look at that shortly. And some of the other activities. Of course, we skip the discussions. Class and interface assignment activity. Then you have a frameworks quiz. Then for the second half of the week, an applications assignment, applications quiz, the class and objects program assignment, that's optional. For those people that want to do the programming in the class, then you will do the programming assignments. Constructor program, same thing, that's optional. And for those that don't do the programs, I'll come up with an alternative work for you to do to earn the same amount of points. And of course, the object-oriented programming quiz and the framework and objects unit exam. So that's the work for week 5. So I'll move on down here. And just a couple of reminders for the framework and objects unit. I have all the quiz previews in one document, one location, so there are 3 quizzes there. Okay, framework and objects. Well, let's go ahead and let's look at the finishing plan first. What the finishing plan is just a simple activity for you to kind of get an understanding, and for me to get an understanding of what you plan to do for the class. So what you'll do for this is, remember, the class is worth 1,000 points, so it's pretty easy to do the math on items 1 through 3 right here. So 795 points, that's equals 79.5%, which is a B minus. 595 is 59.5, which is a D, which is passing. So what you'll do with this, you'll go find your exact grade percentage that you have now and the total points you've earned so far. Now, you do not get to revise this work, so listen carefully and do this work properly. It's pretty easy to figure out. So go to the grade book, find your grade percentage and the points you've earned so far. Now, what grade percentage do you want to earn for the class overall? Do you want to just get 60% to pass? Do you want to get 80% to get a B? Do you want to get 95% or 98% to get a high A? What grade percentage? So just put down one grade percentage, the lowest grade percentage that you'll settle for this class. Now, how many more points do you need to get there? So as an example, if you have 232 and you want to get 795, then that means you would have to get like 563 more points. So in question number 3, I want how many more points than the points you have now do you need to earn? Simple math, isn't it? To get to the final grade percentage that you want. How many more days are there? Well, it ends on October 11th, so count up all the days. There's 5 assignments and include the points that you'll finish by then. And then give an estimate how many hours do you think you need to work each week. So this is a pretty easy way to get, I think it's like 25 points or something. Okay, framework and objects unit. So this we're going to start looking at. We looked at software development and things like that, things that get done, like if somebody's doing plans for a house, or we looked at plans for programming, right? We're now going to look at the structure of programming and how programs are put together, like the skeleton of programs. So in this whole unit, we'll look at the .NET framework, distinguish between class and interface, define class and objects, use class, objects, and constructors in a program, define different application types, and define object-oriented programming. So some of these things, of course, we don't do the discussion, so don't worry about those. And all of these assignments, the points may be changed on the ones you have to submit, so always go to the grade book to see what you need to submit. Now this just talks about the global economy, and it talks about like a common language. How do we communicate globally? Do you think we need a common language? Just gives you an idea to think about. You're not doing this discussion, but just think about it. The reason it talks about this is because computers use different language than people use. Okay, section A, and before we get into that, let's look at the write-up. So what is the .NET framework? What does MSIL stand for? What does it do? Lists the services provided by CLR. In section A, so there's a discussion. Don't worry about doing this discussion. We skip all those. So in this section about .NET Framework, name different components of the .NET Framework, explain what CLR is, explain common type system, understand MSIL, and understand what the basic class library is. So the .NET Framework. So if you think about it, compare it like the framework for a building, that's going to be the structure of it, right? The 2x4s and 2x6s that are used. The framework for a person, of course, is our skeleton, the bones in our body. Well, software applications, they also have framework. So the .NET Framework, right here, the .NET Framework is the skeletons or applications that can be changed by the software developer as needed. So that's what the .NET Framework is. It's a set of skeletons or applications that can be changed as needed by the developer. So inside the .NET Framework. So the number of things inside it, and as you think about the .NET Framework, computers understand their own language. So the source code is what you type in, then the compiler translates it, and then the computer understands it, and it translates it so the MSIL can understand it. So here's how it works. There's the source code. It gets translated into MSIL, and this is what the computer understands. So that's why you have to have that compiler, because it has to translate what we type in to what the computer can actually understand. That's what compilers do. More about the .NET Framework, and you can see that it talks about compilers, which is a set of programs that translates the source code. So you can see we have the source code we type in, and if it's Visual Basic .NET source code, actually all of these go into the the MSIL, Microsoft Intermediate Language, and then it goes through the Common Language Runtime, and then the native code comes out of the computer for the user to read. So you can see that there's a lot more than just what you type in. Everything gets translated and changed into different languages so it can all be understood. So there's something called the Common Language Runtime. And the Common Language Runtime does 5 things. It manages threads in your programming, manages memory, manages security, collects garbage, which means pieces of your program that aren't necessary, don't work, and it handles exception. So those are the 5 things that CLR does. And that's the service of the .NET technology. So it manages the needs of the program, where your program needs to have. And you can read through this to see what different things like memory management helps the memory of any program. As the computer is running, it helps the program run more efficiently. Thread, when a program is executed, it's called a process. A single process or sub-processes are called threads. So this processes the individual steps or the threads. Thread management is actually the process that looks at those threads and determines how they're going to work most efficiently. So you can see that, like when you close a web browser, that's all part of, those are different threads that are happening. So the threads, they have to be controlled. If they're not controlled, the memory management doesn't work very well for your computer. Exceptions handling. This handles the program flow when anything unusual takes place. So if there's an error, or like if you're supposed to type in a password with a minimum of 8 characters, but you type in a password with 7 characters, that's going to be an exception. So it'll clean that up. It'll give you an error and tell you to do it the right way. Garbage collecting is identifying available or free memory, reusing it, taking out things that aren't necessary just to free up some of that memory. And of course, security is making sure that the program works and free of viruses and unauthorized users can't use it. So here's an activity that talks about CLR process. See what you remember from what we just said. Now inside the .NET Framework, there's what's called the Common Type System. Let's go back to the write-up, see what I have. We already covered all of those things, but we still want to cover this stuff. So a data type is a specific type of data that's used in programming. But there are different types of data, and we've talked about these before, like alpha characters, numeric characters, integers, strings. Like a string is going to be an alphabetic character. And the data type must be declared before you can have the program do any work on it. So there's a common type system that's used, and that's how the data types are declared and used as the program runs. Here's a little bit of a tutorial on the Microsoft Intermediate Language and what it does. So you can listen to the avatar, hit the arrow to listen to the avatar. And it just talks, actually it talks all of this. And it just talks about how it helps translate the language into language that the computer can know or can understand. There's a base case library. And these are the basic codes that are used when creating programs. So it's sort of like the keywords that we use is sort of related to that, but it also uses something called namespace. And namespace is different collections of classes, interfaces, and other codes that are used to create the skeleton for your programming. And those of you that choose to do the programs in this class with Visual Basic, you'll learn about namespace and you'll use namespace. A class and interface assignment. So here you're going to do a quick search on these 5 items, write a short description, and turn it in. So what I would call this Framework and Objects Class and Interface assignment. So that's the name I would save it as to turn it in. Then finally we get over here to the .NET Framework quiz, and of course here's a .NET Framework quiz. All quiz previews are right there. Okay, that was section A. So section B. Explain what the following are. So you're going to explain each of these: console application, Windows application, web application. So you can explain each of those. We'll go down to section B. So in section B, now we're going to talk about applications. So we talked about framework, which is the skeleton. So now we're going to talk about the different applications that a person can make in Visual Basic, or the types of programs that one can create. So we're going to understand what console applications are, what Windows applications are, what web applications are, and learn about library and class library and control library. So the different types of applications, these are the 3 main types of application: console, window, and web. But there are also some libraries that you can create, and of course you make applications for smart devices like smartphones. Now, console application, it's a command line application that runs that allows us to read characters from the console, meaning from your screen. So if you run this simple program right here, then it would print this information out, test for console application, because that's what we told it to print out. So console application gives you the data or the results right on your screen. You interact with it through the keyboard. That's a console application. Next is a Windows application. Of course, Windows application uses a graphic user interface, or GIF. That's where you would use your mouse. So if you think of a Windows application, you've probably seen things like this, right? So this simple programming right here under a Windows application would make this little test button show up, and then you hit the test button, then this test window button or box would pop up. So this uses text boxes and message boxes. So that's what a Windows application is. It works on computers that run Windows-based operating systems. And the last one that you need to really pay attention to is web applications. So web applications are used to create user-friendly websites. So you would have your workstation, type something in, and go to the internet, grab the information from a web server somewhere. Then the web application would make that information so you could see it on your screen. So those are 3 of the main types of applications. Here's a little tutorial or quiz for you. Give that a shot. But then there are a couple of libraries that you can make. So you can make a class library. So these would be some pre-written codes that developers can use to put in the programs they make. And a lot of people have these codes they make up themselves, and it's really easy. You don't have to do the programming as you go along. You can just grab the codes and put them in your programs. Control library, these are the custom controls that you can create, like the text boxes, the buttons, and those types of things. Like this says right here, you can have a list box, a menu, and a text box. So those are some things you can do with a control library. Then smart appliance applications, of course, would be used for your pockets, PCs, cells, tablets, etc. Now in this assignment, if you learn different types of applications, you're going to do a web search to find them. Now what I want you to do, now you're not going to duplicate the ones in the class, but this says at least 5 examples from each type of application. But what I'm requiring you to do, you only need to give me 3 examples, and the 3 examples I want you to give are only from the console, Windows, and web applications. So on that assignment, you're only going to do 3 examples of a console application. You're going to give 3 examples of Windows applications, and you're going to give 3 examples of web applications. That's all I want from you. You don't have to do all 5, it's said here. And then finally, the applications quiz. Of course, applications quiz is right there. Let's go up to the right up, make sure we answer the questions. Yes, we did. Explain what each of those 3 are. 3 examples of controls you might find in a control library, and I talked about that and showed it to you. Section C, 3 mechanisms that help implement the object-oriented model. Lists 4 types of inheritance, and what is abstraction. So section C. So we talked about object-oriented programming before. And object-oriented programming is where you create objects, and those objects you use to design your program. And there are a few different mechanisms, and we'll look at those shortly. Now don't let this confuse you, but what this talks about is like you have a class of objects, and then this is really 1, 2, 3, 4, this is 8 different objects within this class. So we're going to look at class and object, constructor and destructor, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and capitalization. So class and object. So object-oriented programming is techniques through which the developers make use of reusable coding techniques. So that's what object-oriented programming is. And remember, a class gives a blueprint for an object. So a class might be car, but then you have 5 or 6 different types of cars within that class of car. And this talks about cell phones. Like cell phone would be a class, but then you'd have different types of cell phones like the Verizon NV and other types of cell phones. And this program adds 2 integers, but it's a little bit more in depth than what we've seen before. So you can see that you're going to create a class, and there's a public function, and the public function just adds the variable A to the variable B, and then it's going to return the value of A and B. And here's a few notes about the program, so you people that are really into programming, you can kind of read through that to see what all these exact codes mean. Now here's class and objects program, and this again is an optional activity. All the programs are going to be optional in here, the ones you do with Visual Basic. Now this one has you do it in Notepad. Actually, you can do, let's go back. So this has one for subtracting 2 numbers, multiplying 2 numbers. So really, if we go back to here, this one has you adding 2 numbers. So you're just going to make a simple change within this coding to solve both of these, right? So and they're going to have you do this in Notepad. So that's going to be pretty easy for you to do. So you're just going to create those 2, and those can be all in the same document. So I would just call this class and object program. So you're going to need 2 different programs doing 2 different things. First one's going to subtract 2 numbers, second one's going to multiply 2 numbers. Constructor and destructor. Now constructor is invoked automatically, as you can see, when an object is created. So it initializes or begins the object, or gives it its initial value. So it initializes the attributes of an object. So if you're talking about an object that has a value of 7, then the constructor program would give it its initial value. So that's like we did down here. This is part of the constructor portion of this right within here. So this one's going to add 2 numbers, and you look at the methods that it uses. So within the add, the new method is called new. And then a few notes about the program. And again, those of you that are really into programming, you're going to want to pay attention to this, since you're going to maybe create some programs as we go along. Then destructor, it cleans up or deallocates memory. So it cleans up things within your program so you don't have any issues with memory and different things like that. Okay, constructor program. Now this one, I'm not going to require you to do the constructor program, but there are some extra resources from Microsoft. You can go learn how to do constructor program if you want. So that's going to be an optional one. Tutorial on inheritance. Different types of inheritance. You can listen to it or you can read through this. But there are 4 types of inheritance: simple, multiple, multi-level, and hierarchical. And what inheritance means, inheritance is where one item takes the properties of another. So just like you and your parents, it's like genetics. Your parents have certain qualities, and then you being their child, you have a mixture of those qualities. Like I have blue eyes, my mom had blue eyes, my dad had brown eyes. So that's what inheritance is. But within programming, it's where a program or an object can inherit certain things from other objects. So then they would have certain commonalities. And let's go back to the write-up to see what other questions we had here. 4 types of inheritance, just looked at that. What is abstraction? So I want to make sure we keep that in mind. Now there are also a couple of other things about object-oriented programming that's called polymorphism. This is where a single unit can be shown in different forms. And we looked at it a little bit earlier, but polymorphism leads to new concepts, overloading and overriding. It sounds a little bit complicated, but they just want you to know, what that term is. I don't think you're going to have any programs that do it. Overloading, sometimes requirements make it necessary to create more functions with the same name or use the same name of different forms of the same thing. So again, that gets into a little bit more advanced. Even though we're in just general programming, some of these types of things are really a challenge to understand. But I mean, they're not going to require you to do this, but they just want you to realize that these are some things that happen within programming. And you can see that some of the ideas about this program. So again, those of you that are really into the programming, you want to make sure you read these and you can practice some of the programming. There's some program notes. You can go ahead and give some of this a shot if you want to. Abstraction. That is hiding some essential information, just showing the output of the program. So abstraction just makes things simpler for the user or whoever's looking at the results. So you can see here all this hidden code back here, but really what the hidden code does is this is what we want the users to see. So abstraction is hiding some non-essential and just showing the output of the program. So it's sort of like summarizing, giving the person only what they need. In capitalization, that binds together code and data. So it kind of keeps things working together properly. More about abstraction, so you can either listen to the avatar or you can read this about abstraction and how it works. Again, those of you that get really engaged in doing the programming and stuff, you're going to want to learn about abstraction because you're going to face it in some of the programs you do in this class, and if you do a lot of programming on your own or take future programming classes. There's an object-oriented programming practice activity. Go ahead and do that. Then the OOP quiz, right over here on the left. Of course, put a quiz preview right up above. Then finally, you have the unit exam, and there's the unit exam preview, unit exam, pretty basic. So that's all we have for this unit. So if I go back for this unit to talk about the work, make sure we're on the right track. So for week 5, you're going to do the class and interface assignment. You're going to do the applications assignment and the class and objects program, because that was one done in word processor. But the constructor program, that's something that you can do if you want to. That's optional. So that's all the work I have for you. I look forward to your work coming in. Please make sure you get the finishing plan turned in, the write-up turned in, so you can keep your grade going up. Okay, thanks everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.